Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of my Bigfoot sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to mybigfootsighting.com.
My Bigfoot sightings began on January 6th of 2020. My name is Ernie Pack. I'm the co-founder of Pac-Man Paranormal along with my wife Denise. And Bigfoot actually is the reason why there is a Pac-Man Paranormal. On January the 6th of 2020, we were at a cemetery on top of Mitchell Hill in Jefferson County, Kentucky, doing a paranormal investigation. We were trying to locate a particular grave of a particular spirit that we had been communicating with. Neither of us were Bigfooters. We were not necessarily Bigfoot believers. We, being ghost hunters, we were very open-minded people. We thought that there was definitely a possibility that Bigfoot was out there, but we'd never had our own personal encounters. Well, that night, while we were doing an EVP session in the cemetery, at one point we heard 3 loud bangs on trees. We didn't know exactly what we heard. And I said to Denise, I said, was that a tree knock? And I kind of laughed. And she laughed back, and you can hear it on our EVP recording when this happened. She laughed back. She said, I ain't about no Bigfoot tonight. We kind of laughed it off and went about our business. We finished our investigation and we headed down the hill. Now, this is a very steep hill. It's the tallest hill in Jefferson County, and it is part of Jefferson Memorial Forest. It's a heavily forested area with steep hills, and there are hiking trails back there. There's the road that we're on was a very narrow, windy road. There's actually an urban legend around here called the Legend of Crybaby Holler, which is about that road. And having just recently formed a friendship with Denise, I've thought, and she was from Hendersonville, Tennessee. She wasn't from this area. So I thought I'd tell her about that urban legend, and us being paranormal investigators, we thought we'd stop by Crybaby Holler and see if we could hear the baby crying down in the holler. So we stopped the car and walked over there. There's a concrete wall there that is about 4 foot high, 4.5 feet high. So I'm 6 foot tall. I can see over the wall and down a little ways, but without kind of climbing up on the wall, I can see down below the wall. And this wall is along that road to prevent cars from going over the bluff there. It's a pretty steep bluff, and it's a very dangerous curve. Denise could barely see over the top of the wall and like straight across to the next hillside from us. So as we're standing there listening, we started hearing footsteps that sounded bipedal. And they were coming around the hillside toward us from the opposite side of the holler. And we got to looking. It was a moonlit night. Wasn't very cold for a January night. but it was moonlit enough that we could see movement in the trees on the hillside across the holler from us. And at one point, this figure stepped out between trees enough into enough of a clearing that we could make out it was something on two legs, very dark and very big. And it continued on around the hillside, coming around the hill toward us. And then it got down below us to where we couldn't see it looking over the wall. It was down over the hill enough that we couldn't look down to where we could see it. It got directly below us and stopped. And then we heard this very deep, guttural, loud, I want to say growl, but it wasn't really a growl. It didn't sound threatening or aggressive. It was, the best way I could describe it is it sounded like a very large, long, and loud belch. It went on for about 15 or 20 seconds. And I don't know of an animal that can make that kind of noise with lungs big enough to make it for that long. But we heard it, and then it continued walking on down over the hill from where we were at till we couldn't hear it anymore. And I looked at Denise, and she looked at me, and I said, "Are you ready to go?" And she said, "Yeah, let's do that." So we left. We got in the car and started down the hill. And she looked at me. She said, "Do you think that was a Bigfoot?" I said, "I don't know what that was. We don't have bears around here. And what I saw was walking on two legs anyway. I don't know. It was too dark to make out many features, but like I say, it was on two legs, dark, and very big. And basically all we could see was a silhouette. So Denise started looking on her phone. She started Googling Bigfoot sightings near Jefferson Memorial Forest. When she typed that in, the first result that popped up was, "Join the Bigfoot expedition this weekend at Jefferson Memorial Forest." Apparently there had been several sightings in that area recent to that day, and they were having a public Bigfoot expedition there at the park the following weekend. And we kind of looked at each other and laughed like, well, maybe we did just see a Bigfoot. So got back home, and I had worked with a well-known radio host who is a guest host on Coast to Coast AM previously on a live stream at Waverly Hills. And I happened to know that she was very much into the Bigfoot phenomena. So I contacted her and told her about our experience. And, she was fascinated by the story. She said, "Well, we've got to get you on a podcast. And we'll do a live stream. We'll call it Ghost Hunters Meet Bigfoot. And you guys can go ghost hunting. I'll send some Bigfooters out there in the woods with you, and we'll see if we can replicate what happened to you guys." I said, "Okay, well, we can do that." And she said, "Well, what's your team name?" I said, "We don't have a team name. It's just Ernie and Denise. We were just friends at the time. We didn't have a paranormal team or anything." And she said, "Well, you got to have a name if I'm going to put you on a live stream." And I thought about it, and I said, "Well, my nickname's always been Pac-Man. Pac-Man chased ghosts in the game, so let's call it Pac-Man Paranormal." She said, "Perfect." So Pac-Man Paranormal was born because of Bigfoot, not ghosts. And so she set us up for this live stream, and it was back at Jefferson Memorial Forest. And we were the plan was for us to go investigate a cemetery that's in the middle of the forest, while some Bigfoot hunters were doing tree knocks and howls and calls in another area of the forest not far from us. And we were going to see if the two worlds would collide. And we're not technical people, so she actually sent one guy with us that was, he was to handle the technical side of things. He made sure our batteries were charged and we were wired in right so that we could communicate with the live stream. Everything was set up by him and we were good to go. So we started walking up this road called Cemetery Road. We got to a certain point in the road and all of our camera equipment shut down. All of our audio equipment shut down. Our paranormal devices shut down. Nothing was working. And we thought that was odd. We didn't know what to do. We couldn't communicate with the host. We couldn't communicate with anybody. It was just Denise and I up there with equipment that wasn't working. So we thought, well, we'll just walk on up to the cemetery and do our thing, maybe because it was up on top of a hill. We thought maybe when we get up there, we'll get a signal back and be able to at least talk to the host. So we walked another, 200 yards or so, and all of a sudden the equipment came back on. Everything worked again. So we got to the cemetery. We did our investigation up there. Really had no luck, no activity going on up there at the cemetery at all. So we spent 15, 20 minutes up there with absolutely nothing going on and decided to head back toward the main camp to meet up with the Bigfoot people and see what was going on with them. Because at this point, we'd been gone for almost an hour and they had been doing their thing. We could hear them knocking on trees and howling and doing their thing off in another part of the forest from where we were at. So we started walking back down the trail. And suddenly our phones, our cameras, everything quit working again when we got to about the same area where they had quit working before. We looked down and we noticed a place in the trail that we hadn't noticed when we went up there, where it looked like something very large with a very large foot had slipped in the leaves. The ground was a little bit soft and you could see where something had kind of slid in the leaves. You couldn't make out a distinct footprint, but it was a very large impression where the leaves were pushed back and the mud had slid. So we were sitting there looking at that for a moment, thinking, gosh, it'd be nice to be able to document this, but nothing was working. So we walked a little bit further back toward the camp, and Denise sensed that something was behind us. She turned around and looked, and she said, "Look, look, look." I said, "What?" And I turned around to look at her, and behind her, about 100 feet up the trail from us, was this very tall figure kind of peeking around a tree at us. And she said, "Do you see it?" I said, "Yeah, I see it." And it was just standing there, and you could see it was like looking back into the woods, off away from the trail, and then back down the trail toward us. And then it stepped out into the middle of the trail. And for a Bigfoot, which I think is what that was, it was thinner than what I would have thought, but very tall. I would say 7.5 to 8 feet tall. It was wider than a human, but not hugely bulky and massive like I would have expected, and not like what we've seen since. I think this could have been a juvenile or a young one. I don't know. But it stood there in the middle of the trail looking at us for 25 or 30 seconds and then stepped back into the woods. And at that point, my phone, was able to get a phone call out, and I called the host of the show and I told her what was going on. And she was like, well, you got to film this. I said, the cameras aren't working. And she said, film it with your phone. And I'm like, okay, well, I got to get off the phone to do this. And it stepped back out into the middle of the road. And I got off the phone. I pulled my phone up to try to do a video, and all you could see was black. On the video, you could not see what was down the trail from us that we could clearly see in the moonlight. And so that was doing us no good, but it stood there again, this time for probably close to a minute. And we just stood there looking at it, fascinated. And then we heard from over to our right, down deep in the woods, what sounded like, I don't know, chatter. It was like, I don't know. I can't even replicate it. It was like burr, 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 something like that off in the woods. And the figure we were looking at turned and looked over that way. Then we heard the same thing from over to our left. The figure looked that way. And then the figure kind of spun and ran diagonally away from us back over into the woods. And so it was gone. And that encounter was over. So we eventually made it back to camp. All of our equipment worked just fine when we got back to camp. No problems. But it hadn't worked when we were having that encounter. The only thing that had worked was my phone. And like I say, it was useless to document anything because all it was picking up was black. So we did the download with the show host, told her what had happened. And she said, she was fascinated with all of that. And she said, well, we got to try this again. We'll do it somewhere else where you got a better signal maybe. And we were like, sure, we're cool with that. Didn't do any more Bigfooting for months until she set us up with another Ghost Hunters Meet Sasquatch live stream. And this one was to be held at Casey Cemetery, which is near Elizabethtown, Kentucky. It's also called the Gates of Hell. And it's a place, another kind of urban legend kind of place where teenagers hang out on the weekends and ghost hunters go there frequently. It's a place that gets a lot of traffic on the weekends. And this was during the summer when school was out. So we get there. The Bigfoot hunter that she had sent with us that time was a man by the name of Greg Yost. He's known as Squatch Man in the Bigfoot world. We had never met him, didn't know anything about him. And he wasn't there yet when Denise and I first got there. So we decided that we would walk around and get acquainted with the surroundings before he got there and before we started the live stream. And so Denise and I were walking in the woods back beyond the cemetery. Now, Casey Cemetery is located at the end of about a 3-mile long, 1-lane gravel road that goes back into the middle of the woods and dead ends at the cemetery. It's a really, really creepy place. Very hilly ground. There's sinkholes out in the woods and steep hills and rough terrain all around it. But Denise and I were walking through the woods. It was still daylight. We were walking through the woods, just kind of getting a feel for the place and getting oriented so we knew our way around in the dark when the sun went down. And as we're walking, she was probably 50 yards from me. And I heard her say, "What was that?" And I said, "What?" She said, "You didn't see it." I said, "No, what are you talking about?" She said, "Something, and the best way I can describe it to you is it looked like Predator just ran through the woods here. It didn't have mass or anything, but there was definitely something that ran through right there in front of me. And, I couldn't wrap my head around that. I was like, okay, well, cool. I didn't know how to respond. And so we continued walking along, and about 10 minutes later, I saw exactly what she was talking about. The same thing had ran down over the hill in front of me. And that is the best way I can describe it. If you've seen the movie Predator, when the predator is running through the woods, how you just see this mirrory looking image running through, that's what I saw. But it was in the form of the classic Bigfoot. I mean, exactly how you would picture it from the Patterson-Gimlin footage or any images of Bigfoot or drawings of Bigfoot you've ever seen. I mean, this massive creature with long arms, broad shoulders, very tall, just running like a blur through the woods, but you could not make out any features at all. Like I say, it was just a mirrory looking image going along. And then we hear a car coming along, coming down the gravel road. So we start walking back toward the parking area, and that was Squatch Man arriving. And he gets out. We introduce ourselves. Our first time meeting him, like I said. And he's asking us what we know about Bigfoot. And we told him very little. This is the second time we've actually been Bigfoot hunting. And we told him about our first encounter, and he was excited to hear about that. And then Denise told him what she had seen in the woods. And he said, well, you saw one cloaked. And we said, what? We didn't know anything about cloaking or anything like that. He said, yeah, they will cloak, and that's what they'll look like, is just like this mirrory image, or sometimes it looks like gas fumes or whatever. And we were like, okay, well, I guess that's what we saw. So that's how that day went. During the live stream that night, when we were trying to do the Bigfoot hunt, carloads of teenagers were showing up left and right. And it was almost impossible to do an investigation because you had people running around with flashlights everywhere in the woods and cars pulling up and down the road constantly. So we wound up ending the live stream early. And we were supposed to go back the next night. And we called the host and told her that we just didn't think it was doable because that was going to be a Saturday night. It was Memorial Day weekend of 2020. We knew it would be crowded. And we said, we just can't do it. And she said, well, I've already got people that have paid. This was a pay-per-view event. We got to do something. And so I called Squatch Man. I said, do you think we could, because he had told us about his forest in southern Indiana where he did most of his Bigfooting. And I said, do you think we could go up there and maybe do the live stream from your forest? And he said he thought he could. So we set it up, let the host know that's where we were going to be. And we went to his forest in southern Indiana. And he was about to move. I believe he was moving to Washington State. And he wasn't sure when he was going to be leaving, but he was planning to be moving very soon. And he had formed this relationship with what he calls the forest people there in that forest. And he was telling us all about this. And to be honest, Denise and I were kind of looking at him like he was crazy because we didn't know about his connection to the forest people. We thought he sounded crazy, to be honest, when he was telling us about it. But we listened, and we had never actually seen him do his thing with the forest people, because the previous night at Casey Cemetery, like I say, we had kids running everywhere, so it was just kind of it was really disorganized mess, to be honest. So that night, it was Denise, myself, her daughter Cora, Squatch Man, and myself. And one of the things that Squatch Man does is he will bring jelly-filled Krispy Kreme donuts, raspberry-filled Krispy Kreme donuts, and put out on a gifting stump for the forest people. And so he went out, he put those out. He also put some glow stones. He put them in a particular pattern on the stump. And he stepped back and he started talking, raised his hands, started talking to the forest. And Denise and I are kind of giving him the side eye. He said something like, "My friends, this might be my last night with you. I'm going to be moving far away. I don't know if I'll be able to come back here or not. I would love it if you could do something epic for us here tonight. Make this forest come to life. Make it explode. I beg of you, my friends. Do this for me." And he puts his arms down, and me and Denise again are looking at each other with kind of a sheepish grin, like, what is wrong with this guy? Our daughter Cora is kind of looking at us like, what have you dragged me into? And we stood there. After about 15 seconds, we heard a tree crack, pop, and fall to the ground. A big tree. And it was about 100 yards from us, 150 yards maybe, off in the forest. Well, then a few seconds later, we hear another tree off to our left crack, pop, fall to the ground. Then another. 7 trees altogether fell within about a minute and a half. And they were all a safe distance from us. We never felt threatened or anything like that. But it was definitely the forest coming to life. It was definitely something epic, just what he had asked for. And the last tree that had fallen fell into another tree. It didn't fall all the way to the ground. It was caught in the bough of another tree on the other side of the road. It was kind of making a arch over the road. And it's a one-way road through that area we were at. So essentially, if that tree had fallen to the ground, it would have blocked our way out. And Squatch Man would have not been able to leave that forest that he was getting ready to leave. But it got caught in the bough of another tree. And we kind of stood there and looked at it and talked about how epic that was. I mean, it was just, I mean, we all had cold chills, but somehow, it was like you wanted to applaud, because it was something incredible. It started to sprinkle a little bit at that time. And so Denise and Cora got back in the van. And Squatch Man and I were standing out by the road looking in all directions to see if anything else would happen. And we started hearing what sounded like a tree shaking. We looked down the road toward where the tree was that was holding the other tree that had fallen into it. And about 10 feet above where that tree was laying in the bough, there's this huge black mass in that tree, shaking the tree. And this is a big Indiana red oak. It's not a small tree. I mean, it was probably 75, 80 feet tall, 2 feet in diameter at least. And this thing is shaking the tree. And I started beating on the back window of the van for Denise and Cora to get out. They jumped out of the van and come around behind the van there where we were standing just in time to hear the other tree break, the limb that was holding the big tree. And the tree crashes to the ground, blocking the road, blocking our way out. They look up just in time to see this big black mass jump down from about 20 feet up in the tree. It just jumped down. We hear the huge thud and hear it run off into the woods. And, you know, it's a breathtaking experience. I mean, you can't be there and see that and just take it in stride. I mean, it takes your breath. The emotions that go through you, everything from excitement to fear to joy, all of those emotions just happen kind of at once. And it's really, like I said, it's just breathtaking. Well, when we caught our breath, we walked over to the tree that had been holding the other tree. And at the base of it, we find these 2 huge footprints where the forest person had jumped down out of the tree. And then you could see 4 other tracks until it got into heavy leaves on back into the woods where it had ran off. And Squatch Man said, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. I can't believe this happened. I said, well, you asked for it. And he looked at me and grinned. He said, yeah, I did, didn't I? And we kind of laughed and we walked back toward the area where we had started out. And all of the donuts were gone. The glow stones that had been placed on the stump were rearranged. And we were looking for the donuts. There was a flash of lightning because a storm was coming in. It hadn't arrived yet. It wasn't raining or anything, but a storm was coming in. And when the lightning flashed, Denise, Squatchman, and myself saw 5 massive figures standing almost shoulder to shoulder about 50 feet from us. And again, these were all encounters at night. You couldn't make out details. You could just see the size and the mass of these things. And then the lightning flashed again and they were gone. And we never heard them come. We never heard them go. But they were there and then they were gone. And I can't explain that. I couldn't explain it then. Now I think I have a bit more of a grasp of it. But back then, it was just mind-blowing to me. As a ghost hunter, I've seen a lot of things. I've seen apparitions appear and disappear and things of that nature, but never thought that Bigfoot had those abilities until then. And I always thought of it as a flesh and blood creature that would rip me to shreds if I encountered it in the woods. And that night changed all of that. I realized it was far more. It could rip me to shreds if it wanted to. It's just judging from the power it took to push those trees over. But we never felt threatened at any point, even when we had the 5 standing 50, 75 feet from us. It didn't feel threatening at all. It was kind of a spiritual experience, honestly. I mean, it was just mind-blowing, eye-opening, and totally changed my perception of what Bigfoot might be. Later in the night, Squatch Man, he has one in particular that he's encountered everywhere from Pennsylvania to Montana to Washington State, down to Tennessee, and just about everywhere he's traveled, that he calls Big Red, because it has red glowing eyes that are self-illuminating. And that's something else I never would have expected. But he asked that evening, he said, Big Red, was that you? If that was you, can you show me your eyes? Can you light them up for me? And within a matter of a few seconds, we see these two glowing eyes that look like red flashlights shining from off in the woods, maybe 60, 70 yards from us. And you could see them blink, the head turn. You could tell that these were self-illuminating eyes. And so that weekend, that Memorial Day weekend of 2020, when that happened, just totally changed my perspective on what Bigfoot might be. The first encounter that we had at Jefferson Memorial Forest, I left there feeling afraid, because I knew then that something was out there, that Bigfoot was not just a myth. And at that time, I was still convinced that it's this big, hairy creature that will rip me to shreds. But Memorial Day weekend of 2020 changed all that. And I realized that they are not just a flesh and blood creature. They're more of a energy being, I don't know if it's interdimensional or spiritual or what it is exactly, but I'm convinced that it's more than just a flesh and blood creature. They can appear that way, just like a spirit can appear as a full-bodied apparition or a shadow figure or a mist. Bigfoot seems to have all those same abilities. And a spirit can do physical things like open and close doors, move objects. Bigfoot can leave footprints, move trees, break trees, knock on trees. And it can also move invisibly and silently. And it kind of opened my eyes to all of that. And since that night, since coming to that understanding and kind of forming our own relationship with the forest people, Denise and I have had encounters at, probably a dozen different places, including Squatchman's Forest in southern Indiana, Fort Duffield here in West Point, Kentucky, where we host events now called Spirits, Squatches, and Stories Around the Campfire. The Bell Witch Cave in Adams, Tennessee. Indiana State Sanatorium. We were up there for a ghost hunt, had a Bigfoot encounter. Garnetsville Cemetery near Brandenburg, Kentucky. And most of these places that we've had these encounters, we weren't there looking for Bigfoot. We were there doing a ghost hunt, and Bigfoot found us, just like that first encounter that we had. I firmly believe that there's some definite connection between the spiritual world and these places like cemeteries, like haunted locations, like Civil War sites, or Indian massacre sites, places that hold a lot of energy, sacred grounds, places like that seem to be places where a lot of sightings happen, not just ours, but when I read through other Bigfoot sightings, a lot of times they're attached to places like this. And I don't know the answers. I don't know how this all ties in, but I'm convinced it does. I don't know. Every time I get an answer with the forest people or with anything paranormal, it just gives me 1,000 more questions. And I would love to get the answers to all of those questions, but I'm sure they would just lead to thousands more. So I'm just kind of continuing my journey. We get out every chance we get, and we don't knock on trees. We don't howl. Every now and then we'll do, if we're hosting a public event, people want to hear the howls, or they want to try to knock on trees. And we try to give them what they want, if that's what they want, but that doesn't work. Occasionally you'll get a howl back. We have gotten tree knocks back. We don't use white lights. I don't think they like flashlights. I think they can see infrared. So trail cams and IR cameras and even FLIR cameras are of little use. We've had very little success with anything like that. The only thing we've ever had success with is taking photographs and announcing that we're taking photographs and saying, if you don't want to be in these, you're free not to, but we'd love to have your picture. And as crazy as that sounds, that's what we do. And occasionally we'll get a photograph that is never clear. And, people, you see people online saying, yeah, of course, another blurry photo or another blurry video. Well, maybe these energy beings, the forest people, don't necessarily want you to have good 4K coverage of them. I don't know, but we've never gotten anything really clear. The only thing we've ever gotten really clear pictures of is the eye shine. And we've seen the eye shine in every color, from red to blue to green to yellow to orange, even purple. And 6 years ago, if you would have told me that I'd be saying anything like this, I would have thought you were crazy. But I've experienced it. I've experienced it several times now. The eye shine is a very real thing, and it's not reflected light because, like I say, we don't use white lights. We go out there in the dark most of the time. If we use any light at all, it's a red light, and a red light will not reflect green. But we see green eyes in the woods. We see yellow eyes. Like I say, we've seen it in all colors. It's a whole different world than what I thought it would be when I first got kind of dragged into the Bigfoot world. It's more of a spiritual thing than it is anything else, more of an energy thing. And I kind of feel like if you go into the woods looking to profit off of Bigfoot or exploit them in any way, you're going to have zero luck. And I think that explains why some of the best researchers out there, our best known explorers, hunters, and researchers out there that have been on the trail of Bigfoot have little to nothing to show for it. They're there to exploit them and not just experience them. I think there are some questions, some mysteries that are not meant to be solved or answered, and just experience it and be in awe of it. And that's kind of the attitude that we've adopted. And it's worked fine for us to have the experiences we've had. We've been able to show, I would say, probably over 200 people now. We've given them their first Bigfoot encounter when we've taken them in the woods with us. And it's all thanks to Squatch Man and the things he's taught us. And you bring the right energy, the right attitude out there, and I really feel like you can get introduced to a world you never thought existed. So that's my story. Hope you enjoyed it. That's all I got for now.
My Bigfoot sightings is why I created Folklore Bigfoot Investigations. And this all started back when I was a teenager, actually. 13, 14, I was doing a squirrel hunting. And, of course, the big den trees was right over the Cattering Creek here. And I went down there and looked around and finally found where the squirrels was at. And then all of a sudden I started hearing what we call now chatter talk. At the time, I didn't know what it was. It was just back and forth across the creek. And then I started hearing rocks being thrown in the creek. And then I got nervous, here, a 13, 14-year-old boy. And I run back up to the house. Well, actually, my grandpa's house. And my uncle was sitting on the porch, and I was telling him about what I heard. And he said, "Boy, I told you not to go down there. That's where the woolly boogers are." And he griped me all out and told me not to go back down there. And I hadn't really even thought anything about that. And for a long time, and I was at church one day, and one of my friends that was there, he was telling me he was thinking about going on a Bigfoot investigation. And I'm like, I've seen the movie and everything, Boggy Creek and everything, and I don't, I'm not sure that exists or not. I did tell him about the experience I had on the creek, and he said, "Yeah, I bet that was a Bigfoot." And he went to tell me, "Well, if you don't believe in Bigfoot, then you don't believe your Bible." And I'm like, "Now what?" He said, "Well, read Genesis chapter 25, and that's where Esau is born covered in red hair." And he said, "You just follow it from there and see, and then you come back and tell me." I read it, and I'm like, well, maybe. Esau goes and lives in Mount Seir. He marries 2 wives that's giants. So somebody covered in red hair and marries giant women could be lineage of Bigfoot. But anyway, that went on. And that was 2011 when he told me that. At that time, I'm a deacon in the church, so I started taking young boys and kids and girls hunting anybody that their family couldn't go with them. I had free time. So we started the Arkansas Boys, and we had up to 40 kids that we'd take around the state hunting and everywhere. And we called it Arkansas Boys. That's spelled with S-A-W because we cut wood and sold it to fund the hunting adventures for all these kids, and we made a YouTube channel for it. Well, 2014 is the year that we went to Falk. And the reason we went to Falk was it was in January of that year, and we was all sitting around waiting on turkey season. Didn't have a lot. We was coon hunting a little bit at night. And I said, well, jokingly, why don't we just go down to Falk and search for the Boggy Creek monsters, which most of these kids didn't know nothing about it. So I had to show them the movie. And we ended up lining everything up and posting on our Facebook page and everything. The Arkansas Boys is going to Falk. So we end up going to Falk. There's there's 2 vehicles of us. And we get down there and go to the Monster Mart. And we go in and looking around at stuff, pretty cool. And we end up meeting Denny Roberts that owns the Monster Mart. And we got to talking, and we know a mutual friend that lives at Clinton, and we was talking about that. And he said, well, I normally don't do this, but for y'all, here's a map. And I got that map on my wall where he marked all the recent sightings, and there's actually one the week before on Jonesville Road. Part of our group decided to split up and go to the actual Ford house, and part of us went down on the Jonesville Road. Well, we got down there, and where he had marked where this recent sighting was, and there's a house there in the woods that had been burnt all the way around this house. and we found what looked like feet prints. It was probably 14 inches, something like that, wide or long, and about 6 inches wide in this, where this burnt ash was around this house, old house place. And you know, it's in January there, so it's cold, but they wouldn't be nobody. It looked like just like regular feet prints with toes and everything. And we was like, wow, that's cool. We actually videotaped it. It's on one of our videos. And we ended up messed around there and looked around, didn't find no other kind of signs. We got back in the vehicle, and it was probably 4:30 that evening. We was going to head out, you know, and we got going down the road and come around the curve, and about 100 yards, there's something that was big and black, hairy looking. Didn't see a face because it was kind of going at an angle from us, but it took 2 steps, crossed the road, and run right through a 4-strand barbed wire fence, and just kept going out across this field. We pulled up there, and my buddy, he's got Down syndrome, but he jumped out, and he was yelling at it, trying to get it to turn its head or anything, and it just run right on into the woods. So we was amazed by that, you know. And ended up going back, meeting all of our group back at the Monster Mart there. And once we got in there, we was telling him everything about it. And in walked a film crew. And then he thought we was that film crew because we told him we come to film everything. So on the way back, we got to thinking, well, was this a setup, you know? But I mean, I'm 6'5", and it's a head taller than me. Whatever crossed that field. And we was like, well, did they have somebody arranged or something? And I was in a suit or something. And we was like, well, we don't know. But anyway, we come back to our office here, the headquarters, and talked. And after that, everybody started seeing that online because we posted a video about it. And everybody started calling me from around the state. Hey, we've had this encounter. We've had that encounter. Can you come check it out? So we started going and checking out different encounters around the state. You know, it's just like 4 or 5 of my Arkansas boys that went with me. And once that started, there's people we met along the way that's become great friends and colleagues that we've worked together. And we've went pretty much all over Arkansas except the southeast corner and done investigations. We've done investigations in Bald Knob, Oart, Ouachita Mountains, up in Mountain Home. But my next sighting was at Oart, and this is probably 2017, when we've had several groups join our group. We call Arkansas Bigfoot Cartel because there's several Bigfoot groups that help us. They may have 1 or 2, 3 core members in their group, and they can't get everybody to come and everything, but they'll come to ours, and we all meet at one place where there's a lot of activity. Well, this occasion we was at Oart. Actually, it's near Turner's Bend. We went down in there, and we had several people. It was like 17 people that was with us that evening that we went in there, and all family members, you know, from each of there's women, men, all kinds. We pulled up there. We no more pulled up there and got out of the vehicle, and this is a huge oak tree was shaking in the top. And we was looking around, and me and my buddy Clint started down the road so we could get a better view up in the top of this. Well, it was dark enough that we all had spotlights and was shining in there. Once them lights hit that top of that tree, you could see the back shoulders of it, its arm, and its right hip as it jumped out of this tree. And where this tree is, it's probably 15 foot down. It's on a little bluff here by the area we was parking at. So from this tree, probably 20 feet up in this tree, and then 15 foot down into this little bluff side there, this thing jumped and hit, and we heard it taking off down the woods. And that was just exciting and scary and all at once. But there's like 17 people there that seen this. I mean, it was crazy. And then my next sighting was at Mountain View in the Sycamore National Forest up there. We had went up there and had a team that was doing a night investigation. And our group, it actually, part of them, it went up the creek, the river there because it was dry. And they was just seeing what they could flush out or whatever. There's no lights on, but they was walking up and they was in radio contact with us and telling us what they heard and everything. And we was further down the river in an area where we had found tracks and stuff and figured that this would be the way they come if they jumped them up, or if there was too much activity and our guys come running back, we could meet them back at the river. Well, they went up there, and one of the guys actually jumped up on a bank, and this was his first Bigfoot investigation. His name was Wallace, his last name was, and he jumped up on the bank, and when he did, there was one, this is his testimony, swiped his hand at him, and Matthew, one of our experienced team members, had to grab him and pull him off of that bank as that hand swiped by him, or it would have got him. Well, when they did that, they come running back. Well, so was the Bigfoot or another one that was closer to us come out at us and was shaking two trees that was there by us, kind of bluff charged us. And we saw that. It was more of the 8-more type Bigfoot, because it was down on all fours as we hit it with the spotlight. When we did, it went back into the woods. So that's the 2 investigations that we've been on, and that we seen one. And then the third one was back at OARC, but at a different location. We saw it. It's called what we call an Area 2X, and it was a cold night and a November night, and what started it's about 10:30 at night. We started hearing little kids playing down in the valley there, the holler, and this goes into the national forest, so they shouldn't be no houses or nothing, but you couldn't understand them. You could hear the laughing and then and laughing again and everything. This went on for a couple hours like this. We started to go down to it and decided that probably wouldn't be a good idea or anything else. If it's got young, like a bear or something, they're very aggressive. So we decided against that, but we listened to all that going on. And, probably about 1:00 in the morning, we heard one big whoop that went woo. And as that, all that chatter, talking and kids just shut up. Well, the next morning we went down into there and found an area that had all the tree structures and breaks, and had the major X that for an alpha male. As we was searching around there was 3 of us that we ended up jumping one up or just our sound. But anyway, it took off down through the trees and through the holler, and all we got to see was the back hip and side of it when it got up and took off through the trees. Now, we've had thermal encounters where we saw them on the thermal imager that we got. We've seen at least 5 at one time that was around us at camp. And how that occurred was we went to a place that we call Castle Rock, and we tried 3 years to get to this place, and every time we went there, something occurred. One time, one of our members fell, and we had to help him out. He messed his knee and everything up, and so we only made it to the first creek. There's 3 creeks to this Castle Rock. The next time we went, we made it to the second creek, and then everything, all the weather turned bad, and it was raining and lightning and everything, so we had to turn back and go back. finally, this time we had made it to what we call Castle Rock, and it looks just like a castle. Well, we got up there, and there's a rock that's got a cave that's probably 15, 20 feet deep into this cave, and it's about 10 foot tall. Well, inside this cave, there was a place that was sticks broke up, little pieces of plastic. It looked like a big bed. And we got to looking around. There's a whole lot of little bitty tracks that was probably anywhere from 6 inches long, 2 inches wide, down to about 3 inches. So there's a couple different younger ones there. And around to the back side of it, we found a 18-inch track. So we figured they'd just been there and left when we was walking up the mountain. We're old and fat, and as you go up the mountain, you make a lot of noise. We figured they had just left. Well, anyway, we spent the day there checking stuff out, and then finally started heading back to camp, and we could hear stuff walking, trailing beside us, limbs breaking and stuff. So we figured we had one that was trailing beside us. Then, as we made it back to camp, we found out that one of our team members was leaving, and they loaded up and left. So we had to prepare camp for the night. And when we did that, we ended up, it was only 4 of us left there, me, Dale, and my wife, and my cousin. And when that had happened, it got dark, and then we got one on thermal. As it was on thermal, we watched it come in and out, and we was watching it. And about that time, my buddy Dale said, "Hey, I got one on my right side here on thermal." And we was both watching them as rocks started flying into the camp. Well, while that was going on, one of our friends come driving in. There's only one way in and one way out. And as he drove in, all this stopped and everything was off of thermal when he got there, and we was telling him about what had happened. And all of a sudden, Dale said, "I got another one on thermal," and then the rocks started throwing back in, which was, none of them was bigger than the cell phone. Most of them was smaller. We figured that we made them mad because we went to Castle Rock and run them out, and they were showing that they could run us out. Well, while that was going on, we was watching the thermal. I was having him video it because it don't have a recording form, and he was recording it. And about that time, Dale yelled, "There's one that come up the bluff," and as it come up the bluff side there, he said, "Watch out." And he had a dog that was in his tent. It come out and run and bit it in the back of the leg as it jumped off that same bluff side where we had that encounter a year or two before. We was at our area 2 at OARC, and this had all occurred after the one jumped off the bluff there. We decided to build up the fire and keep it up all night. And all night long, we got them on thermal, that would get within 80, 90 feet of us. And, but it just kind of slowly tapered off during the night. So that was good. So I think we just upset them because we went into right where their housing area was, and which we didn't actually know that. But we'd found tracks that led that way, so that was actually our bad, I guess. But from there on, now we're still doing investigations all over Arkansas, and look for anybody that's had any encounters to contact Folklore Bigfoot Investigations, and they can even join our group, the Arkansas Bigfoot Cartel. And we go all over the state, and we got representatives in all 4 corners of the state, and we all go by the Arkansas boys. So that was our whole adventure.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, love's in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. The sound of a memory brings me back to the bluegrass playing on my dad's 8-track. His pickup man had been through it, getting through the day on Scruggs and Skags, bucking hay bales to those Tennessee jams. There's no other way that I'd do it. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something going backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Pace of the city life drives me wild. The only tune is the cars rushing by, with the bass on the stereos booming. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something going backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Something going backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the tremolo Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm, ride chicken porch swing, mama's best sweet tea, kind of sound.